Good evening and welcome to our Building Bridges Awards ceremony and dinner. My name is Nader Hashemi. I'm the current director of the Al-Walid Center for Muslim Christian Understanding. And this is a very special evening tonight for two reasons that overlap and that mutually reinforce each other. We are celebrating the 30th anniversary of our center, and at the same time, we are honoring with the Building Bridges Lifetime Achievement Award the founding director of the center, John Lewis Esposito, the distinguished university professor and founding director of the Prince Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim Christian Understanding at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. It's not an exaggeration to say that when I think of the center that I currently direct, that this is the center that John Esposito built. Words fail to describe the immense and enduring scholarly contributions to Georgetown that John has made over the years. He has deeply touched and inspired many students, many colleagues, many people in the broader community who he's interacted with. I have much more to say about John Esposito tonight. The night is still young, John, so get the Kleenex ready. There's other people here tonight that want to say a few words to honor you as well. We also have a couple of surprises that I hope will surprise you, and they will be revealed over the course of this evening. I wish. But I want to begin by thanking the hardworking staff at our center that make our center run on time for putting on tonight's event. I want to thank Andrew, who unfortunately can't be with us tonight, Geraldine, Priscilla, Chloe, Grace, who used to work at our center, is here as well. And most of all, I want to thank Shireen Durrani, our Director of Programs. Some of you might have heard that Shireen is leaving our center after 5 years of hard work. I want to thank her for her contributions to our center, her dedication, her due diligence, her professionalism since she began working with us in 2015. I said this morning that we had ordered a gift that was supposed to arrive from the Middle East. Since I made that announcement this morning, the gift actually has arrived. So I'm going to ask Shireen to come up here, and I want to present her with a parting gift. Thank you very much, Shireen. Yeah, absolutely. Since this is a historic occasion, a brief word about the history of this center. This center was formed roughly 30 years ago by the hard work and dedication of John Esposito. It was put together and it was supported by a group of Arab and Muslim Christian businessmen who were very concerned about the world that we were living in, particularly how our world was being transformed after the end of the Cold War. Recall the moment. The Cold War has ended. There was a big debate about new enemies that would face the West, the United States, and Samuel Huntington at Harvard published his big essay, The Clash of Civilizations, that people were reading. And there's a rumor that right around that time, a book that John Esposito had published called The Islamic Threat, Myth or Reality was discovered by one of the Arab businessmen, Muslim businessmen who were interested in the center. They were impressed by the book, and that inspired them to support the center in its early infancy. The next major transformation, of course, that gave this center a big boost were events related to 9/11. And in 2005, John Esposito was able to produce a major endowment for the center, supported by Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. There's an interesting story here that I won't get into, but indirectly, Rudolph Giuliani played a role in getting us that money. So at the end of the day, Rudolph Giuliani was good for something in this life. So we're indebted to him. But since then, the Al-Walid Center has become an internationally recognized center as a leading place for the study of Islam and Muslim Christian relations in our contemporary world. We've hosted top-notch scholars, produced a vast amount of scholarship, taught thousands of students over the years. Georgetown University, I think, needs to be singled out for its recognition in supporting the center and its work. I don't think a center of this nature really could have existed at many other universities. And this is a reflection of Georgetown's Jesuit heritage, which is very much interested in understanding the role that religion plays in society, the role that religion plays in our contemporary world. At our center, as in Georgetown, we take religion very seriously. We try to understand its relationship to society, its impact on our broader world. And so we want to thank and recognize Georgetown University's support for the existence of our center. And of course, the third transformative moment that is now giving new meaning and purpose to our center is one that you're all familiar with, and that's the situation in Gaza. The situation in Gaza, or the Israel-Palestine conflict, is a fault line between the Western world, the Christian world, broadly speaking, and the Arab-Islamic world. I suspect that this crisis is going to shape our world going forward. It's not going to end anytime soon. And I suspect this crisis that is just in its infancy is going to give us purpose and meaning. And the good news is that we're perfectly situated to respond to this crisis, to do what academic centers do during great moments of consternation and transformation as we teach. We offer new courses, we organize seminars, and that's what we've been doing since October the 7th, and we'll continue to do that going forward. So with that as an introduction, let me transition now and ask Iman Saima to come up and begin with an opening invocation.
Good evening, everyone. As I prepare my little speech before we pray together, I am overwhelmed with joy and gratitude to this celebration and this gathering. Starting with the vibrancy in colors that we see on the table, the diversity in the attendance, and if you look at the giveaway bags, beautiful writing in Arabic. That is the legacy and the accomplishments of Dr. Esposito. He really dedicated his time to bring understanding between two major world religions. No, I'm not his previous student, but I know of his 55 plus books. I followed his work ever since I came here to Georgetown 3 years ago, simply because I was told, you need to meet this celebrity on campus. But now this celebrity is off to doing even more great things in his next chapter, and we wish him the best. You know, as I gather today with you guys, group of academics and students and leaders in your fields, different platforms that you have been entrusted with, and given where our world is today, and if we want to keep it real, we have a Muslim student who lost the opportunity to speak as a valedictorian in one of our prestigious universities in America. We have university presidents being fired. And we need to really keep this ongoing dialogue going as we regain our voice, as we ground ourselves spiritually, as we truly embrace who we are fully. I just came from a panel discussion about women in faith. And they said, introduce yourself. And that's always like, what would I say? I'm an educator, background in teaching and mental health. I'm a Palestinian American. And the eyebrows go up. I said, it's okay if it intrigues you. That's who I am. And in places like this, we get to own each and every piece of us, because that is given to us uniquely to our journey. So thank you, Dr. Esposito, for paving the way, for dedicating your legacy in the academics. I was told you're gonna cry. Oh, I'm so sorry, not from me. Not from me, God bless you. Only the beginning. Where is the tissue box? Thank you for making this place a safer place for Muslims, really. I came to Georgetown 3 years ago simply because it's a place where I can be freely talking about God. Coming from Orange County, California, in the mental health field, religion and spirituality is not a place to be talked about, right? But really what pushed me to move across the continent really, is to talk about God, to be really surrounded by people, individuals, and leaders and academics who welcome spirituality, who welcome diversity in religions. So I thank you for being that leader for all of us. I'm compelled to recite a small surah, little not chapter, little sentence in the Quran from Surah Al-Zumar. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هل يستوي الذين يعلمون والذين لا يعلمون إنما يتذكر أولو الألباب. Say, are those who know equal to those who do not? Only those of knowledge and deep thought are in a constant state of remembrance. Thank you for the legacy and the accomplishments that really makes this a center point for each and every one of us. Between what we don't know and what we know, sometimes it's a hard conversation. We just need to lean in and we get to have it. And you never know what's gonna open up. Now, when we say invocation, that means prayers. Not everybody prays. It's all good. But I want you to not leave this moment and just go inward and just give TLC to a place that you're working through, or perhaps you're in a winning season, and just hold it there. And for the rest, let's pray. Almighty loving one, we ask for your blessings for each and everyone present this evening. We have gathered to honor the accomplishment of a man who revolved his life around spirituality and the love of your people. Let your divine knowledge strengthen him to continue to speak for issues of concern of our human family. Give him the ability to keep going as he got us used to, his love of learning and asking the hard questions. Empower him with tools that would bring justice to the poor and humility to the rich everywhere he goes. Walk along his side as he coordinates his efforts in starting a new chapter in his life. Make his mission continue to be of justice and peace, his path of equality and righteousness, his spirit of accountability and responsibility, and his daily agenda of gratitude to you. We ask for your blessing on the host of the dinner, those in attendance, and those who prepared it. May our hearts never forget the needy, the oppressed, and the less privileged, no matter how much blessings we have. Almighty God, receive our thanks and hear our prayers. To you is the dominion forever and ever. Amen. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like that John Esposito has finished his dinner, so we can move on to the next part of the program as dessert comes out. John, we're very honored to honor you tonight, and we have several videos that many people have put some hard work into producing by way of honoring you. We also have several people here tonight who want to come up and say a few words in your honor, so I want you to simply sit back, relax, watch the video, and then at some point I'm going to call you up to say a few words. So this is a small token of our appreciation for your many contributions to Georgetown, to the center, to fostering the study of Islam and Muslim-Christian relations. Go ahead.
Sorry I couldn't be with you for this event. It's something that I really wanted to be present. I'm delighted, however, to join you electronically, as I say, virtually, for the 30th anniversary celebration of the Center for Muslim Christian Understanding, a very, very important unit in our university. And then also to honor the remarkable achievements of one of the very few distinguished university professors at Georgetown, John Esposito. As all of you know, the center was founded and designed by John to reflect Georgetown University's Jesuit heritage and the recognition of the importance of religion in contemporary international affairs, and then to understand and to encourage closer Muslim-Christian relations in global affairs. As we know, and as I, as provost treasurer, in addition to his work at Georgetown, Professor Esposito has an international visibility. He's served as president of the American Academy of Religion and Middle East and the Middle East Studies Association of North America. He was a member of the World Economic Forum's Council of 100 Leaders, the European Network of Experts on De-Radicalization. He was a senior scientist for Gallup, the Center for Muslim Studies at Gallup, and he was an ambassador for the UN Alliance of Civilization. He's served over the years as a consultant for many agencies, both in the US and in other countries, for corporations, universities, and media. Remarkably, he is the author of 55 different books. Could be a record at Georgetown and at many universities, many of them exploring Islam and in the role of that religion in modern society, including politics, globalization, the role of women, peace building, and most recently, and importantly at this moment, Islamophobia. In 2013, Professor Esposito was named president of the American Academy of Religion. In 2013 also, he received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Council for the Study of Islamic Societies. And then in 2015, the Distinguished Career Research Achievement Award from Georgetown, something that we're all very proud of. And it was in 2000 that he was named the Distinguished University Professor. So all of those things are internationally visible attributes of John. We are lucky, however, that he's in our community. He's one of us, and he has spearheaded efforts of this center for so many years to the benefit of the larger institution. Although I'm not here, my gratitude and joy at this event, hopefully I'm able to communicate virtually. John, thank you for all that you have done for Georgetown and the world. We treasure you as a colleague. Thank you.
Good evening. It's a privilege for me to have this moment to share a few words to celebrate our colleague, Distinguished University Professor, John Esposito. John, I regret that I am unable to join you for this special evening. I wish to take a brief moment to offer my most heartfelt appreciation for the extraordinary work you have led here at Georgetown, and to thank you for the center you have built to serve our community and strengthen our world. I can think of no better time to recognize your leadership than at this moment as we honor the center's 3 decades of service. Over these years, you and your colleagues have built an unparalleled place for dialogue and understanding between the Muslim world and the West. This center is a home for deep intellectual engagement, public scholarship, and sustained dialogue, creating a vital bridge between Muslims and Christians, between cultures and across regions, fostering the kind of interreligious and intercultural engagement that is at the heart of our work as a Catholic and Jesuit institution. John, as a scholar, teacher, global leader, and the center's founding director, you have opened new possibilities for us as a university. I am personally grateful to you for all of the special moments we have shared together over the years, and I am honored to offer these words of appreciation on this special occasion. John, thank you.
I'm Jean Esposito, here to tell you about the life and career of my husband of 59 years. John Louis Esposito was born in an Italian Catholic neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, to John and Mary Esposito. John was the oldest of 3 sons. His mother, a devout Catholic, was a skilled seamstress, and his father worked on building cameras for the U.S. space program. John's mother's deep faith and his father's stress on justice and helping others deeply influenced the young boy for the rest of his life. John and Brother Lou were very active altar boys who won awards for serving the most masses. By the 5th grade, John was resolved that he would be a Catholic priest. At age 14, John joined the Capuchins, a strict Franciscan order. Family visits were strictly limited. There was no going home at any time except for the death of his immediate family. John wore the scratchy brown woolen Franciscan habit at all times. Waking at 4:55 a.m., he prayed and chanted 5 times a day. He studied and worked. He ate in silence. He had no radio, TV, or newspapers, considered unnecessary distractions. Yet at times he had the thrill of talking to people all over the world after earning his ham radio license. After 10 years, John made a difficult decision to leave the Capuchins 2 years before ordination. He moved to his parents' Jersey City, New Jersey apartment. They were in a building labeled Georgetown, predicting a career 29 years later that was truly unimaginable at the time. John visited Our Lady of Victory's church in Jersey City to lead a youth group. There he met me. I was a college junior working as an evening receptionist at the rectory. The next year, I graduated, we married, I began teaching high school English, and John went to grad school. John earned an M.A. in theology at St. John's University, and then started Temple University's doctoral program in Catholic theology. While at Temple, he taught at Rosemont, a Catholic women's college. He taught Old and New Testament, and especially enjoyed teaching Christian ethics, civil rights, the Vietnam War, and human sexuality. However, his interests changed radically during his doctoral studies. At Temple, gradually, John became fascinated with Hinduism and Buddhism, and even more captivated with Islam, and its connection to what he discovered was the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition. John engaged Islam as a living faith. His professor, the Palestinian Ismail al-Faruqi, made Islam and Muslim history come alive. Faruqi taught the influence of Islam on Western philosophy, medicine, and science. Most of the students in John's class were Muslims on scholarship from Egypt, Pakistan, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Becoming friends, they learned about John's Italian background and joked about their class as the Temple Mafia, and John became the Don of the Temple Mafia. Temple grads returned home to positions in government, universities, and business. Given his focus on Islam, John studied Arabic at the Middle East Center for Arab Studies, MICAS. It was a training center for British diplomats in the mountains of Shemlan, Lebanon. He also had Arabic tutors in Beirut, where I was teaching at the International College. After 2 years, it was time to return home, but many told John, "You'll never get a job." Professor Faruqi helpfully said that John could teach in Gaddafi's Libya or in apartheid South Africa. However, we sent 100 applications to America for positions in world religions. Thankfully, the College of the Holy Cross in Massachusetts hired John. When he told the senior Jesuit there he would teach world religions, the Jesuit said, "You'll never last." But he did. John became the first non-Jesuit department chair, the director of the Center for International Studies, and later the college's first Loyola professor of Middle East Studies. In the 70s, John traveled to lecture and meet with professors, religious leaders, and leaders of Islamic movements in Egypt, Sudan, Jordan, Kuwait, Pakistan, Malaysia, and Indonesia, about whom he would often write in later years. By 1979, Iran's revolution stunned the world and grabbed the headlines daily. Fears of exporting the revolution spread, and people watched Cries of Death to America on TV. The revolution expanded John's career dramatically. He was suddenly offered many book contracts, which gave him the chance to address the amazing lack of information and then the flood of misinformation about Islam and Muslim societies. Because of his book contracts and speaking, John has jokingly told audiences that he owes his career and his Lexus to the Ayatollah Khomeini. John has always said, if you want to know what people believe and practice in everyday life, you need text and context. In his memoir, he wrote, I've always been drawn to see how the faith of Muslims plays out on the ground in specific Muslim countries, lives, and societies. I've been acutely aware of the need to distinguish between the faith of the many and the twisted interpretations and actions of the few, between the mainstream majority and a militant, extremist minority. In contrast, two prominent scholars, Bernard Lewis at Princeton and Sam Huntington at Harvard, gained global attention, warning of a clash of civilizations between Islamic and Western societies. John critiqued their writing and debated them at conferences and professional meetings. During the 90s, John and his colleagues addressed the dangerous stereotypes and fears about a global religious resurgence and explored Islamic institutions central to democracy, women's roles in society, and Islam's resurgence as a global force. Concerned about negative press regarding Islam and Arabs, Hasib Sabag, a Palestinian Catholic entrepreneur, sought a way to provide a better understanding of Islam to students, faculty, and the general public. Hasib chose Georgetown to create the center. Located in Washington, D.C., considered the crossroads of international power. The center would reach out internationally to academic and religious communities, government officials, journalists, and corporate leaders. Led by Hasib, Arab, Christian, and Muslim businessmen funded the center. Its mission would be addressing Islam and Christianity in history, politics, and international affairs, as well as current relations between the Muslim world and the West. The center was seen as the right idea at the right time in the right place. When Georgetown's President O'Donovan discussed the director's position with Hasib, both identified John as their candidate. Hasib produced copies of John's books, Islam, the Straight Path, and The Islamic Threat, Myth or Reality, and he declared, this is the person we need. John went to Washington, and we did a commuter marriage for 2 years. John created a center with immediate high profiles by hiring John Vole, Yvonne Haddad, and Amira Sanbal, as well as Shireen Hunter. They had strong academic credentials and public profiles that gave the center immediate attention and the credibility needed to make an impact. The center, known as CMCU, emphasized excellence in training the next generation of leaders, as well as broad international exchanges. John and John Vole traveled from Africa to Asia, speaking at universities and meeting with scholars on many issues. John was a keynote speaker to 200,000 participants at an every 10-year Jamaat-e-Islami conference in India. Over the years, John visited Malaysia often. He knew many people in academia, government, and Islamic organizations. Also, Anwar Ibrahim, who is now Malaysia's Prime Minister, became a strong supporter of the center. Anwar worked with Malaysian benefactors to endow the Malaysia Chair for the Study of Islam in Southeast Asia at the center. Aware of how much John was away from home, Hasib offered to fund my travel with John. It was perfect timing since my company had been sold and I was ready to move. By 2001, CMCU was well known for authoritative insights on Muslim-Christian dialogue as well as Islam in the Muslim world. However, no one was prepared for 9/11, a major challenge for Muslim-West relations, to say the least, and to CMCU's mission. As a CMCU board member exclaimed in 2001, the fallout from 9/11 has set our mission back 10 to 20 years. After 9/11, Saudi businessman Prince Al-Walid bin Talal was seeking ways to promote better understanding between Muslim countries and the West. John visited him in Saudi Arabia to discuss his interests. They talked about the advantages of a successful company versus a startup as John shared information about the center. Al-Walid, the shrewd businessman, decided to invest in CMCU. Georgetown received the $20 million that John had suggested to strengthen the center as a force against Islamophobia and hate and for international dialogue and exchange. With its future guaranteed, John and the center faculty of the renamed ACMCU, Al-Walid Center for Muslim Christian Understanding, focused on an expanded vision and outreach. Their many publications were translated into major languages in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia, and they became primary resources for authoritative information on Islam and the Muslim world. The multiple Oxford encyclopedias and reference works, edited by John and his colleagues, helped to institutionalize new ways to understand the Islamic world and Islam's role in history, politics, and society. After 9/11, John focused on writing for a broad audience. Using Q&As, he explained what everyone needs to know about Islam. He explored jihad and holy war, the rise of terrorist groups, and emerging Islamic leaders. John's writing today focuses on understanding Sharia and examining the future of Islam in a world of increasingly globalized and growing Islamophobia. As an endowed center, ACMCU's work will continue, especially in these critical times. John has established linkages with scholars, centers, and universities across the world. Over his 50-year career, John has published 55 books, received 5 honorary doctorates, and many awards. John raised new funds for the Bridge Initiative, created to shine a light on Islamophobia across the world. With over 1 million followers on social media sites, Bridge provides a valuable resource for students, academics, journalists, and advocacy groups across the globe. John was deeply moved and grateful for the Festschrift, Overcoming Orientalism, edited by Professor Emerita and former center leader Tamara Song. We will conclude with some of their comments to John.
John became my role model more than ever. He was the unflappable, consummate public intellectual who brought academic heft to his public conversations and modeled personal integrity when he refused to be cowed by those who tried to bully him into silence.
You are in many ways the chief architect of the infrastructure of post-Orientalist Islamic studies. And I mean not just your specific scholarly contributions, but everything that you've done to shape and create resources for the field as a whole. The reference works, the journals, you've not just added distinctive intellectual contributions and scholarly perspectives, but you've helped to institutionalize them, to kind of make available as resources to not just scholars, but broader publics as well, a way of understanding and thinking about Islam and Muslims that has just been so powerful.
Once I was attending a Friday prayer in a mosque in Washington, D.C., and the Imam in the Jummah khutbah said, everyone should read John Esposito's What Everyone Needs to Know About Islam. Now, this one, I've never heard a Muslim cleric or a Muslim khatib ever mentioning a Christian scholar to be read to learn about Islam. So that was very heartening, and I was really taken aback.
I was always impressed at how calm you could be about things that made one so angry. But you just kept going, and the center was just a phenomenal resource for people, and you would bring, government agents would come because it was Georgetown, and you gave us the stage. You gave us a place for our voices to be heard and to be stated.
Another important contribution that John has made, and that has been his deep sympathy, his compassion, and his understanding for the struggles of Muslim societies around the world, struggling for human rights and democracies against despotic regimes, many of them supported by the West.
Professor Esposito was kind of a lone voice in the intellectual world saying, no, Muslims are human beings. Muslims have a rich tradition. Muslims are working hard to contribute positively to the modern world through their own tradition, right? And his scholarship reflected that. But I want to stress it wasn't just his scholarship. There are a lot of people who do excellent scholarship, but it's a very few professors that have a public impact on the lives of students and the citizenry, right? And that is truly remarkable. Thank you very much for the service to your field, for your courage, your moral integrity, and your leadership, without which many of us would not be here today.
John Esposito, a dear friend, a remarkable scholar, prolific writer, but more so, as far as I, Aziza, and the family is concerned, is a charming personality, very passionate about reform and justice. We are indebted to you, John, and Jean, of course, for being a very dear and kind friend. As I have said before, even in the presence of President Joya, that during the years I was in incarceration, your works, particularly the series of encyclopedia on Islam and history and the contemporary world, was an important compendium for me. So please, I must remind you and Jean to come to your second home, Malaysia. We will host you and we'll have to listen to your discourse on Malaysia Madani. I don't believe in retirement. And technically, of course, you are living a legacy of that important university, Georgetown, but you'll be remembered dearly, not only by students, by friends, and you'll continue to work and write and lecture. So thank you again. I wish you well, and I must reiterate my invitation for you and Jean to come to Malaysia. Thank you.
We have three people here tonight who would like to come up and say brief remarks in honor of John Esposito. So I'll call them one by one in order. The first one is Tamara San.
I'm going to make it very, very brief. I just want to say three things about John, just things in case you didn't know them. One, just stories that other people have said, have told me. One was the daughter of a well-known Muslim scholar was seated next to Dr. Esposito at a banquet one time. This was ages and ages ago. And she looked over and she said, "Are you John Esposito?" And I'm trying to see if he remembers this, because he told me this part. And he said, "Yeah." And she said, "Oh, this is like sitting next to Elvis Presley." the second one, a well-known, very well-known American distinguished professor of history, talking about John's formidable travel schedule, said, and I think he said this to you, do you know the difference between John Esposito and God? And John has said, well, what is it? John Esposito is everywhere except Georgetown. And before I tell you the third one, I want to just make a few comments. The girl who said that, like, sitting next to Elvis Presley should have said, like sitting next to Bruce Springsteen, because A, he's John's favorite, and B, because John really is the boss. But the professor who said the joke about John being everywhere actually was on the money, because in fact John has and does travel, as Jean's video just showed, widely and endlessly. But that's for a very, very good reason. And I'm reminded of when I was a new PhD and Dr. Esposito was president of MESA. And I think the meeting, the annual meeting, the presidential address was in Toronto. And so I trundled up there, and I didn't really quite get the gist of your talk at that time, but over the years I've understood more and more. Because what Dr. Esposito said, and at that time the field was thoroughly dominated by theoreticians in various fields of what I call social science. I know I shouldn't do that, but it was all theory. And Dr. Esposito said, the people we study, the people we work with are not theories. They're human beings. Theories don't teach us about human beings. We have to go and meet with them and interact with them. We will not know Muslims until we live with them. That's why he travels so much and continues to travel. So that leads me to the third thing that people say about Dr. Esposito, because I followed his example and I do a lot of traveling too. And every place I've gone, the first question is, do you know John Esposito? And, you know, I acknowledge that I have the privilege, and they say, he is our friend. And that, to me, is a lifetime achievement that very few people will ever, ever emulate. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Asmaf Saradin.
I should never follow Tamara's son. I can't possibly up that at all. But I'll take a shot at it. It is an extreme challenge to try and sum up Professor John Esposito's outsized influence within and outside the academy. Dr. Esposito is such a towering figure and has dominated the field of Islamic and Middle Eastern studies in a way that no one else could or has. There are hardly any intellectual and moral giants like John anymore in our field. And it depresses me to say this, but he may be the last of his kind. I count myself as having been extremely fortunate to have met John years ago when I was a graduate, a lowly graduate student, and benefited not just from his scholarship, which goes without saying, but from his wisdom, his humor, his compassion, and his basic humaneness. I have, over the years, learned from him to help and mentor junior faculty, to take an interest in their research, the way John has and continues to do so. I have learned to find the courage to take principled positions on contentious issues, and that's not easy. And to never lose sight of your moral compass and your larger obligations to the global village that we cohabit. He was and remains a leader both inside and outside the academy, and he sets the bar very high for those of us who aspire to be like him. When many of us were dragged out kicking and screaming out of our comfortable ivory tower to talk to the media, and were invited to write opinion pieces in the aftermath of September 11, Professor Esposito became my role model more than ever. He was the unflappable, consummate public intellectual who brought considerable academic depth to his public conversations and refused to be cowed by those who tried to silence him. And there were many, and there continues to be many. At the end of the day, John is, after all, more than just a scholar and academic. He's an engaged scholar and academic, so that he also feels morally called upon to take part in the important conversations of our day taking place in the public square. For example, about what should be considered ethical foreign policy measures on the part of the US government toward the Middle East and the Muslim majority world, a topic that is currently very much resurgent again and more relevant than ever. He reminds us that it's not enough to just write books, teach our classes, and climb up the academic ladder of success. We also have to evolve as human beings, to care about our larger moral and ethical commitments to the outside world, and put our expertise at the service of our fellow human beings. That has made Professor Esposito a tireless warrior for social and political justice. He exemplifies what it means to speak truth to power, even if that invites the vitriol of those who would prefer that he remain silent and be complicit in injustice and wrongdoing. And he does all this with unflappable wit and an urbane and cosmopolitan flair. Through his erudition, his penetrating insights, and a capacious generosity of the spirit, our honoree continues to strive to challenge the clash of civilizations mentality, still so endemic in influential Western policymaking circles, which continues to foment global political instability. Thank you, John, for everything you've done over the years, all of which I continue to cherish and treasure, and for your invaluable guidance, your friendship, and empathy. Mere words are not sufficient to express my gratitude to you, but I'm glad I've had this opportunity to at least try. Thank you.
And last, but certainly not least, John Esposito's longtime companion and colleague and co-writer, Professor John Voll.
Wow. I have an advantage, I think, over everyone in the room. I'm the oldest geezer here. And I think I need to take advantage of that, because I think it's important for us to have one dimension that hasn't been mentioned, maybe bring it to a close. All of the discussion has been about what John has done, marvelous things and so on. I want to just remind you where he started, not in terms of the Cistercians. This morning I said, one of my questions is, gee, I wonder what would have happened if he wouldn't have left the order and led the order. Maybe we needed an Esposito leading the Cistercians in a major order. However, the world in which John was a graduate student, and which I was a graduate student, was very interestingly different from the world that is behind all of the descriptions. Being a graduate student in religious studies in the late 60s was an interesting time, a very interesting time for people who were interested in religious studies. Probably the leading sociologist of religion, Peter Berger, at that point, was quoted in the New York Times in an article in 1968, and it is reflected in his scholarship. Berger said, by the 21st century, religious believers are likely to be found only in small sects, huddled together to resist a worldwide secular culture. Yes, all huddled off in small sects. But I can say, as a graduate student at Harvard in Middle Eastern studies, I can say that if I would have proposed a dissertation subject on the victory of religion in determining politics and economics and so on, if I'd have proposed that as a subject, people would have said, "That isn't that nice that he's still sort of 18th century or whatever." And so I would just want to remind you that when we heard people saying John was shaping the way that we think about religion in society, religion in politics, religion in economics, the first battle was to persuade people that it was worth their time to talk about religion at all. And if you look at many of the Middle Eastern studies surveys and so on from the 1960s, you're lucky if you can find a reference to, say, the Muslim Brotherhood in any degree or form, or religion in general. So that part of John's role was to help persuade the world and people what the role of religion was. And the role of religion was not simply minority sect activities. It was increasingly an important part of life. John's work helped to affirm the fact that it is important for us to view society as a society in which religion is an important determining factor. Now, I could preach that sermon for a long time, but I just want to finish with a question. So how did John do this kind of stuff? Well, one of the early times, 40 years ago or so, John and I worked on a conference that resulted in the book Voices of Resurgent Islam. That was in 1980. It was a year after the overthrow of the Shah and the Iranian Revolution. It was a conference that was organized by John and the College of Holy Cross. The title of the conference was Resurgent Islam, Prospects and Implications. We had the conference up in New Hampshire, in Durham, New Hampshire, where the university was that I was. We had it up there so that people wouldn't get distracted by the big city distractions of Boston and so on. There certainly weren't many distractions in Durham, New Hampshire. But what was this? The conference was, I think, a good example of John's methodology. The conference folder describes it. It said this program will bring together 7 Muslims from abroad and 10 scholars from the U.S. who represent a cross-section of discipline and geographic areas of specialization. The conference seeks to provide a setting in which Muslim leaders from abroad who have first-hand knowledge of the ways in which Islam is an active force in their countries and regions may help U.S. participants better appreciate and understand the nature of Islam and Islamic movements today. Discussions will focus on those concerns and issues which are at the heart of contemporary Islamic movements. It was a small, intimate, conversational conference with a really interesting list of people ranging from Ismail Farouki and Carl Brown and so on to Anwar Ibrahim and Hassan Turabi. Can you imagine sitting in rural New Hampshire having a cup of coffee with Anwar Ibrahim and Hassan Turabi, just sort of sitting there? But at any rate, John did not do all of this as a charismatic crusade. What he did was he created communities of people who shared interests even if they disagreed. And he was able to get people, even if they disagreed, to get together and sit and talk. Which means that in a way, John is working to bring, I like to think of it as bringing an end to Muslim-Christian dialogue. I remember that meeting up in Durham, New Hampshire. We did not have Muslim-Christian debates. We did not have Muslim-Christian dialogue. I had conversations with Anwar Ibrahim. And I think that John's ability to create a conversing, discursive community is his major contribution to interfaith relations and especially Muslim-Christian relations. Thank you, John.
Before asking John Esposito to come up and receive the award that we are honoring him with tonight and receive a gift that we've specially prepared, I'd just like to sum up what has already been said in my own words and speak as to why John Esposito has made an indelible and lasting impact on my own career and understanding of the Arab Islamic world, religion and politics, international affairs more broadly. So most people don't know this, but John Esposito did not apply for a job at Georgetown University. Georgetown recruited him. Within 7 years, he was appointed to the rank of university professor, the only one in the School of Foreign Service at the time, joining a select rank of a handful of professors at Georgetown who enjoyed this prestigious honor. Academically, as you all know, John is a leading scholar in the study of religion, international affairs, focusing on Islam and Muslim-Christian relations. And it's not an exaggeration to say that he has single-handedly defined the modern study of Islam in our contemporary world. But I really want to focus on one particular area where John has made an indelible and an enduring contribution, and that is in the field of the study of political Islam in particular. Recall that when political Islam burst onto the global stage in terms of capturing mainstream attention in the late 1970s and into the 1990s, it was uniformly portrayed and understood by the media, by the foreign policy community, by Western governments, and critically by most academics and intellectuals as simply a terrorist threat, a national security challenge, something from a bygone world, period, full stop. There was zero interest or really intellectual ability to understand this topic in a nuanced way on its own terms from the perspective of the global South and from the perspective of the non-Western world. In the early 1980s, there was a widespread rejection and inability to understand the staying power of political Islam, its many faces, its many manifestations that are often shaped by socio-economic and political context produced by authoritarian regimes, many who were backed by the West. This is where John Esposito stepped up and made an original and groundbreaking contribution that has stood the test of time. To many experts on Islam, John Esposito is a hero for being one of the first and most prolific in making the point that Islam was a political force and would continue to be a political force in our modern world, regardless of American foreign policy preferences. Quote, John Esposito is the single most important pioneer in bringing this idea to the American public, observed Graham Fuller, another expert in the field. Now, 3 years ago, I was asked by Tamara-san to contribute to a Festschrift book honoring John Esposito. That book is on the table, and it's sitting in front of you. It was also in the video. And when I started to think about what I wanted to write about John Esposito, I started to reread some of his older and earlier works: Islam and Politics, The Islamic Threat, Voices of Resurgent Islam, Islam and Democracy. And while I was rereading these books by John Esposito, I had a profound sense of déjà vu come over me. What struck me as I was rereading his material is that I was reading material that was intimately personal, very familiar and intellectually soothing, and then it hit me that much of my own work on the Middle East, on Islamic politics, was simply a derivative and extended commentary on John Esposito's pioneering contributions to the field. And two of them stand out in particular, and I think they deserve recognition: John's early critique of modernization theory and the secular assumptions that informed it in terms of how we understand political development and human progress, and secondly, his nuanced and very contextual writings on political Islam that I just referenced a moment ago. My own scholarship on Islam and secularism, religion and politics, Islam and democracy has been deeply shaped by your work, John. I'm intellectually indebted to you. And when I say that, not just me, but many people coming up behind you in the field. Now, why has John Esposito been able to write so eloquently, insightfully, and influentially on matters related to Islam and modernity? I think the following point has been unrecognized, and I want to identify it. It's specifically and precisely because of his Catholic background. I want to suggest that his Catholic background has helped him to provide a unique insight into the challenges that Muslims face with respect to the modern world. And I owe this insight to a colleague of mine when we were in Tunisia and we were just having a conversation, and he pointed out to me, he said, "Hey, Nader, have you ever noticed that some of the best scholars in the West who have written insightfully on Islam and the challenges of the modern world tend to disproportionately come from the Catholic tradition?" And we started listing the names: Jose Casanova in sociology, Charles Taylor in philosophy, Alfred Stepan in political science, and then obviously the next name on the list was John Esposito in religious studies and international affairs. This isn't a coincidence. I think it's precisely because of your Catholic background, precisely because of the fact that there is a recognition that religious traditions that have a deep history, that meet certain challenges as they meet the modern world, have to go through certain religious reforms, transformations, adaptations. That's exactly what's happening at this contemporary moment for Muslim societies. And I think it's that unique insight and sensitivity that you bring from your own Catholic background that has given you this unique insight to make the contributions that you have made. I also want to highlight something else that was mentioned before in some of the speeches, but I want to sharpen the point because I think it's really significant, particularly at this moment. I want to thank John for taking risks and for absorbing the many body blows that have come his way over your distinguished career. And I'm referring specifically to the attacks, to the defamation, and to the slander that has been produced by various intellectual groups here in the United States, attacking you, the center, largely people who come out of the Islamophobia industry, led by such notorious figures like Daniel Pipes, Frank Gaffney, and websites like Campus Watch and the Canary Mission. If you stop and think about it, how many academics working in the United States today have to work in such a toxic environment where every word they say, every word they write is given a microscopic analysis to take quotes out of context and then to defame them? Now, of course, most of these attacks, if you know the story and you know the background, really stem from one issue and one issue only, and that is your principled, courageous defense of the human and national rights of the Palestinian people. Many academics have chosen to stay silent on this issue, to not speak up out of fear of jeopardizing their careers, but now we're seeing, particularly in the context of Gaza today, how critically important it is to raise our voices, to speak out for, stand up for justice, and to speak up in defense of the human rights of the Palestinian people. And in many ways, when I think about your career, John, and the risk that you've taken, particularly on the question of Palestine, I'm reminded of that famous quote from Noam Chomsky, stated over 50 years ago, that it is the responsibility of intellectuals to speak the truth and to expose lies. And I think in much of the work that you've done in terms of talking about Islam and politics, you've done exactly that. I'm also reminded of a very famous quote that stuck with me when I was growing up by the late Edward Said, who said that it's easy to talk about human rights in places where it's not controversial. Talk about human rights in North Korea or in China or in Russia, but the defense of human rights specifically matters, Said noted, in places where it's difficult to talk about them, where it's controversial to talk about them, where you get pushback when you talk about them. And of course, that's here in the United States, particularly at elite universities and among elite political classes. So for taking those risks, I want to recognize you for doing that. You've heard tonight about the 55 books that John Esposito has written, about all of the reference works. These books have been translated into many languages. The over 100 peer-reviewed journals is part of John's resume, the Oxford University Press reference works, et cetera, et cetera. John, I think it's important to point out, in his distinguished career, has the unique distinction of being the president of both the Middle East Studies Association and the American Academy of Religion. He has been the recipient of many honorary doctorates. The last time I counted, it was 6. He's been the recipient of the American Academy of Religion Martin E. Marty Award for the public understanding of religion, Pakistan's Qadi Azam Award for outstanding contributions in Islamic studies. The money that he's raised here at Georgetown University is something that hundreds and thousands of students have benefited from. The list goes on and on and on. I don't know how many academic, PhD and MA committees John has served on, but his contributions to this school, to the university, to the field of Islamic and religious studies and international affairs is really immeasurable. And so for all of these reasons, I could go on and on, but for all of these reasons, we are here tonight to give you a Lifetime Achievement Award. We have 2 gifts that we want to give you. One is the actual Building Bridges Award that we award to everyone who is the recipient of this, and then we have another special gift we'd like to give you. So please join me in giving John a big round of applause for this award and for his stellar career. Please come up, John. And so this is a special gift that we were able to sort of track down. It's a special painting from the from Gaza that appeared in the Washington Post. We tracked down the artist. It's sort of a picture of Gaza before the war began, and we thought, given John's commitment to Palestine question, we thought we would get this to hang it in his office. So so congratulations.
First of all, the plus of this is that because when I saw that thing that my wife did, it made me realize that she wasn't having an affair. I have an office above her office, and if anything, there's always a little tension when I kind of say, I wish you could close your door when you're, talking to people. Well, for the last month, her door is often closed, and I'm not supposed to come in. And she has 2 different doors to go to. We're nearing our, I was going to say 95th, 59th wedding anniversary. We might do the 95th, depends. And some of you know me. know that, and I should tell any of you, I'm very serious about this. If you have a funeral or a marriage, and you need somebody there who will get emotional and cry, I can come. I don't have to know. There's no charge. At our wedding, when we were on the altar, I was saying, go here, there, because of my background. We went to the back of the church where you then greet people, and all of a sudden I find myself crying, and she's handling everybody just perfectly. I'm just that way. As Leslie Gore said, it's my party, and I'll cry if I want to. But I really, it's hard for me to recognize the person everybody's talking about. When my mom came to a talk that I gave, my mother and father, in Maine, and they rarely got to see me, and that people came up and said, what do you think about when you see him? And she said, at least he has a job. At least he has a job. And then they said, well, did John read a lot as a child? And she said, all my boys would have to read, but with John, we needed books with lots of pictures. And it's true. When I got into the field, I never thought I would publish a book. First of all, publishers weren't interested. And the idea that I would publish more than one book, but it was when I saw my name on the spine of a book, it was incredible. And I want to say one other thing I've been dying to say, and I see people from CCAS. For 20 years, I've been pissed that Mike Hudson, when I rate, sorry, that's the least of my language that you have to worry about. That Mike Hudson, when I was able to raise this money in Saudi Arabia, we were in a professional meeting with others, in our seminar. I mean, he said, John, how does this fit in with, and he said something about, how does this fit in with your retirement? And for 20 years, I kept thinking, why the hell would he raise that question? I swear to God, it was last week I thought I was 65 at the time. I mean, I had no, I only had a sense of my age in the last year or two, and it was like, okay, Mike was a good guy. He really wasn't saying it for some other reason. But I'm just, it's just amazing to me. When I got into the field, I never wanted to study Islam. I was a Catholic theologian. I came out of the monastery. We knew nothing about the Vietnam War, civil rights, etc. And suddenly I was in that. I took my beard off when we got married, but then I grew it back, and I had a very big beard, long hair. And so I suddenly got involved in those movements. And I just never expected, is this Bombay Sapphire? You shouldn't be giving me that. It's not. Okay, thanks very much. But there was no such field. And I went there to do a temple. I wanted to go to a secular university to get a degree in Catholic theology, a PhD. And you couldn't do that. In those days, you had to go to a Catholic, just as if you were doing something that Jewish, you went to, et cetera. But I got interested in Hinduism and Buddhism, and then the chairman said to me, I think you should take a course in Islam. And he's a very soft-spoken guy, but I said, I don't see any reason to. I started my degree later in life, and I was married, and I want to finish a degree. And he was a gentle person, but about the third time, he really insisted, and I said, okay, I'll take a course. He said, we're just hiring our last person. It's a Muslim. And I went and I met Ismail Faruqi, and he said, well, congratulations, we need to plan your courses. I said, no, I'm taking one course. He said, well, if you're going to get a degree in Islamic studies, we need to have, I said, no, I'm taking one course. And so then he left me alone, and then about a month later, he called me in his office and he said, here's your application to study Arabic. I said, why would I study Arabic? He said, you're going to get a degree in Islamic studies. I said, I'm not getting a degree in Islamic studies. He said, sit down and fill it out. So I thought, you don't, and they were very competitive. Years later, the guy who ran the program at Penn said to me he had never had any graduate student who said, I need 2 weeks to think about it when he was accepted. And I just did it because I thought, it pays you in the summer. I was a young academic, and it'll be good at cocktail parties, to kind of, and then it was spirit-driven. The guy that taught it was a British diplomat who was the head, number 2 at Shemlan, training, British people. Later on, he was a translator for the Queen, etc. And he got me a partial scholarship, and off we went. But I'm going to interrupt it to say something that I wanted to say at the beginning. In my mom's time, a woman would often say of her husband, my better half. That's my better half. Beyond belief. I'm not being nice in terms of my life. That's more than my better half. She has read every damn thing that I've written. And as I said in a meeting earlier, as my mom said, even when I had a Roman collar, I never looked at women except blondes, and that was it. So anyway, there were just two other points that I wanted to say. We're in an incredible time now. I remember talking to a colleague who's sitting right over there, who was in the Carter administration. And I said to him, we were new in socializing because his wife was in the center. And I said, we were around the same age, probably a little older than I am, I hope. I don't know, I haven't met anybody who's older than I am, so it's very difficult. 18 days, there we go. And then there's John, who was Mr. Inside and now he's called Mr. Outside. I'd never have achieved anything that I achieved if it weren't with John also. But we talked about Palestine and Israel, and we had the same attitude. We knew in our lifetime it's going to be solved. And there was just, and I used to say, which is a bad way of putting it, I used to feel sorry for those poor BASTAERD academics who were like scientists and worked on a cure and retired and there was no cure. So, you know, when we created the center, that was right at a time when it looked like we might be moving in a movement. But I knew in my lifetime that would happen, you know. And so my response is a response tonight that I made in Austin, Texas, a while ago. I was invited by a group that I helped launch 20 years ago. And they invited me back for their 20th anniversary. So you're giving a talk, and you're like trying to be upbeat. And then all of a sudden, I realize I have to talk about Palestine. You know, I mean, you can't walk away. And so I try to talk about the reality and how bad it was. But I said to them, not to worry. It will be in my lifetime. And so I hope they invite me back for their 40th anniversary. I'll only be 103. But I really end by saying, please pray for Palestine. Thank you.
So John, one other announcement I'd like to make, that one of the things we're going to be doing to honor you now that you are heading toward retirement is that I'd like to announce we're setting up a John Esposito Scholarship Fund in your honor. And the person who's going to help us fundraise is someone who you've collaborated with recently, Mahmoud Hi. He's the editor of this book on the contributions of Islamic civilization to medicine. Is Mahmoud here? He said he would come up and say a few words about the scholarship and the fund, and then we'll move forward to the end of the program.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rabbi Shrah li Sadri Amri. One thing which confirmed me today after hearing all this is the ayah in the Quran which says, and among those are the people of the book, the most supportive of you will be the Christians. And John, with his life, has proved it time and time again. I'm going to keep my talk very brief. You've heard all the accolades, and I would declare today that John is the greatest contemporary scholar of Islam today, beyond any doubt in my mind. He is not only an academician, but an ambassador for Islam, and all his works, the Bridge Initiative, all his talks on Israel and Palestine, and the activities that he has created, his highest level in heaven. And the last title I'm going to give him is that of a magician. And you'll ask why. So I was a retired physician, and some of our colleagues, we decided to write a book on the contributions of Islamic civilization to medicine. Mind you, I was not a scholar by any level of any kind. But John converted me into an editor and a scholar. So that's why I've given him the title of a magician. So this book, which is his latest publication, was released in December last year. And John, despite all his busy travels and everything, he gave so much time that it eventually ended up as a valuable contribution. So, and Professor Wohl has also written a very nice commentary in here. So the honor that we have given to John is not enough. And that is why, as a group, we decided that we will establish a lifelong scholarship in his name, that for years and years to come, his memory will be alive. And with the help of Dr. Hashemi and Shireen and Jean, we're going to form a committee which is going to lay down the foundation of this scholarship. And to start with, we are going to raise $1 million so that it continues on in perpetuity. And so all of you and many more will receive letters from us. Please help us establish that, because that's the least we can do for a man like John L. Esposito. Thank you.
And we have one final video. This is the 30th anniversary of the center, so we'll watch that and then get to a conclusion for tonight.
Relations between the Muslim and Christian worlds have been affected by conflict, misinformation, and extremism. With so much fear, suspicion, and a lack of understanding, it's more important than ever to turn to reliable sources of knowledge. The Al-Walid Center for Muslim-Christian Understanding, the first of its kind, was created for this purpose. Based at Georgetown University's prestigious School of Foreign Service, ACMCU is a research hub for the study of international relations, history, and politics. We analyze, document, and publicize the realities of the historic and current relationships between the faiths and religions, relationships which deteriorated at the end of the last century.
Islam had been invisible in government, in education, generally speaking. In terms of really interfaith relations, it was mostly Judeo-Christian. Across the board, in the media, it was all invisible. After the Iranian Revolution and the exiting of the Russians from Afghanistan, the concern of a group of Arab and Muslim businessmen was that Islam would be seen as the next global threat.
So there's a need out there. And it's not just a question about talking about whether or not we meet that need. The fact is, what the stats wind up telling you is that there is an incredible need out there. In fact, Islamophobia is growing far more globally than before. If you look at what's happening with regard to the Uyghurs in China, the Rohingya in Myanmar, the former Burma, You look at what's going on in India, and one can go on and on and on.
And you're actually starting to see that, like America, because they take their cues from the American conservative movement, that Islamophobia and Muslims are becoming part and parcel of European political presidential campaign. You know, there are attacks on Muslims all over.
Samuel Huntington, a professor at Harvard, who also had periods in government, warned about a crash between Islamic civilization and Western civilization, and actually had a phrase in his book that Islam had bloody borders. Not Muslim countries have bloody borders. Islam has bloody borders, and also added, and bloody innards. So the very innards are heart of Islam.
Muslims have also been involved in violent conflicts with Hindus in Kashmir, Buddhists in Burma, and Christians in the Philippines. Somehow, Islam apparently tends to have rather bloody borders.
September 11 was a watershed moment in recent U.S. history when Islam and Muslims intruded into the American imagination in unexpectedly unfortunate ways. Suddenly, Muslims were increasingly becoming integrated into the American mainstream, became collectively characterized as dangerous outsiders and violent aliens. Samuel Huntington's ill-conceived clash of civilizations theory was perceived in many powerful and influential quarters as having been proved true. Islam was a fossilized essence, the clashists would have us believe, and Muslims are hopelessly unable to modernize and adapt to democratic societies.
So there was this exaggerated notion of the role of Islam in militancy.
Due to lack of integration of Islam and other world religions in mainstream education and school curriculum, American perception of Islam was dominated by headlines from the late 20th and early 21st century. Amidst the growing Muslim population worldwide, it is important to understand the distinction between mainstream Muslims and extremism. This distinction should inform our policies and perspective.
The work of the center serves to counter the Islamophobic, inaccurate, and often sensational media coverage that has been so prevalent in our society.
We've contributed to and created a vast body of knowledge about Islam in the Muslim world, more than any other center. And so we do it with teaching, we do it with massive publishing, with 3 colleagues full-time, probably between 100 and 200 books, articles. We've had our work translated into 55 languages. We're responsible for the first encyclopedias of the Islamic world. It was a very activist vision of the center.
The mission of the center remains more important than ever and deserves all our support and help. Check out all its contributions and offerings on its website and become the center's partner and ally to walk on the side of the truth. For more information, visit www.acmcu.georgetown.edu.
And I'd like to end by asking Father Benjamin Hawley to give the closing benediction.
Good evening, and thank you to you for inviting me to this wonderful opportunity to be here with all of you and to offer this benediction. And I offer special thanks to you, Dr. Esposito, for all you are and all you have done. I am tempted to call you Father Esposito, because with a collar or without a collar, you have inspired many, cared for many, brought life to many, and that's what fathers do, that's what mothers do, that's what we human beings do at our very, very best. I began my adult life in the Peace Corps in Upper Volta, now Burkina Faso. I was in a little village that was predominantly Muslim. The next village was predominantly Catholic. The other village was predominantly a traditional religion, so I grew up amidst religious dialogue. Religious diversity. I didn't know the word at the time, but there it was for me. I went to Cornell, got a graduate degree. Joined the Agency for International Development. They sent me to Indonesia. For 5.5 years, I lived in Jakarta. I was awakened every morning by the call to prayer. My colleagues, my government co-workers, they observed Ramadan. I sort of observed it with them. They invited me to their Hari Raya festivities. I felt very much part of their world and part of their community. The government sent me here to Washington. I backstopped programs in Jordan and Oman, where I visited for several months at a time. The government then sent me to Yemen. where I was for 2 years. I left in June of 1990, which, as you may remember, was a very significant summer. In that time, I became Catholic. Why? It seems silly to say it this way now when I look back. I realized in my government work that the US government was not about to bring about world peace nor solve world poverty. So I was in crisis. The next thing I knew, God came along. The person of Jesus came along, and the next thing I knew, I was a Jesuit. And so I discovered, with God all things are possible. Why? Because God inspires people like you, I hope people like me. God calls us by name, lifts us up, puts us to work, gives us hope, gives us opportunity, gives us courage and strength that we need. So in that spirit of called by God and to serve God and to serve God's people, I invite us all to take a moment in silence. In this silence, I invite you to be in this silence in any way that is most appropriate to you, to pray if you wish to pray, to be silent as you may wish to be silent. And first, perhaps we can just take a moment to savor the experience of this room, the people around us, all that you represent, all that you have done, all that you can do and will do. Savor that in this moment, because in a moment we will no longer be here, but recall this moment now with great joy and with great gratitude. Good and gracious God, you are the one true God. We believe in you as the one true God. We may call you by many names. We may come to you by many different paths, but you are the one true God. You are the source of our life, the source of our hope, the source of our happiness. And we thank you this evening for all that you have brought about in this world, through all of the people gathered here, in particular through Dr. Father Esposito. We thank you for his courage, his insight, his wisdom, his dedication, his hard work. We thank you for all that we have been able to do with him, through the work of this institute, through the work of this university. Bless us now. Bless us always. Share with us your strength. Share with us your peace. Give us a sense of hope, of courage and patience and perseverance, a knowledge that you have invited us into fullness of life in service to your people. Help us never to be discouraged, never to look back in doubt, but always to move forward with great hope, knowing that you are with us now, always, in all the days to come. We pray to you each in our own way. We ask all of these things through Christ our Lord. Amen.